and live your life today. It doesn't matter what they say.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Red Lotus Life. As always, I am here with my co-creator, Sara Elizabeth Hoffman, and today we have a guest on. I'm so excited. It's Enos Barger. He is something that I've been anticipating this conversation actually for a really long time, because I know that Sara Elizabeth and you have had some conversations in the past that she shared with me that I just went, wow, this is so incredible. So we asked Enos if he would come on today to share with us a little bit more about himself. I'm actually going to use your words. I had the pleasure of meeting Enos a couple of days ago and having a conversation with him. And when I was asking him about himself, he actually used these words that he is viciously authentic in his alignment and with purpose right now in his personal work. And it really is diving deep into narcissistic behaviors and patterns and tendencies and just everything that encompasses that. And so today we brought him on. We really wanted to ask him to share his experience and really deepen our understanding as a collective of what exactly is narcissistic behaviors, patterns, and tendencies, having this honest conversation around expanding our understanding and also developing some empathy and compassion around this. Because as Sara and I are spiral practitioners, one of the things that is like our lifestyle as spiral practitioners is mirror theory. I don't know if you're familiar with mirror theory, but it really is everything that we see in others, we see in ourselves. And so when it comes to even these tendencies, Sara and I have had a lot of conversations in depth about how we are able to see these tendencies in ourselves as we heal and go on this journey. And as we, expand and have these conversations with other people as well. So I'm very grateful that you're here today with us. And Sara, talk to me about how we even got to this place of having Enos on and having this conversation.
So I had the pleasure of meeting Enos at a retreat, actually. It was we were there in order to sort of go on a healing journey, do some deeper work. And I was in a place where I was feeling safe enough around the masculine to be able to get curious and to start asking some questions. And I was asking questions around relationship dynamics, the energetics, how all of that works and what does it look like. And I was asking some specific questions about, to the masculine, and this being one of them, is what was it that actually inspired you to do the work that you're doing now? Like, why are you here? And so those conversations sort of continued to happen throughout the retreat, and they deepened, and they had a really profound impact on me. And I walked away with validation of some beliefs that I've held really near and dear to my heart, and have been really tentative to share. And that is that no matter who we are, it is possible to heal, but we have to make the choice. That choice has to be made. We can't force anybody to do that work. And so on my journey, it went sort of from trying to force others to do that work, to trying to inspire them to do that work, to understanding fully that it's not my job, but I can hold space, and I can hold a point of love and compassion, and plant seeds along the way. So yeah, that's how these conversations came to be. And it's been so fascinating for me, as we have been having these conversations, to reflect upon the fact that I was telling Lori, and then she sort of had the same experience, that you literally could have told me my story. It's just a difference in the energetic dynamics and how it's ultimately expressed.
Mm-hmm. 100% told my story too whenever we had met. So,
Yeah.
Enos, I'd love to hear, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Life today is better than I think I ever could have imagined it possibly being. In the same regard, I'm doing work that is intensely uncomfortable, and and really letting go, working actively to let go of conditioned pieces of me that have really been an anchor in my life, to get me thus far in my life. But I think everything has a season, and it's time to let go of some of those things. And so it's like it's kind of like when you first learn how to swim, and there's the person that's in front of you and you hold on to them, and then you gradually kind of get more independent and you start holding on to the edge of the pool. And then eventually you have to let go of something and just have faith that this thing, that I'm going to be okay. It's going to work. I'm going to be able to swim, or I'm going to be able to float. I'm definitely in, I think, that stage right now where some of the core pieces of me, that I've bolted on around my true essence, that my true spirit, that they've served me in one way or another through my life, and I can't completely. I've really worked hard not to vilify this portion of my existence, because all in all, my life is. I'm very, very blessed, and I'm very thankful, and I have a lot of gratitude for where I'm at. I have great relationships. I have 3 wonderful kids that despite all the mistakes I've made as a father, we've healed in those areas, and I have great relationships there, and I'm able to have a great relationship with my ex-wife, and then I have a wonderful fiance in my life, and in a group of people, and a depth of friendships that I pray other people have at least one, and I've got multiple in my life. So ultimately, life is really, really good, but it certainly wasn't always that way. So today, I'm glad to be here to, have a chance to share, my personal experience with these sorts of challenges. And I don't profess to be any sort of an expert in these areas. All I can bring to the table is, my personal experience with it, and then what I've gleaned from having conversations with other people. Some people were, clinical therapists, or my daughter's is about to finish her master's in rehabilitation counseling, so I've had depth of conversations with her, and but ultimately, I hope that, relaying, my journey through this can, hopefully somebody can grab a piece of it, just a small piece of it, that maybe is a catalyst to something different for them. And it may not even be that people are truly suffering from what you would consider a narcissistic type of a tendency or a behavior, but maybe it's just a vicious inner voice, that we can break identity from, and so I'm immensely thankful for you guys giving me the opportunity to be on your platform, and honored that, that me sharing what I've shared with just Sara Elizabeth has been something that's been impactful in her life, because I've gone 48 years without really ever centering in on my purpose, and it's becoming a lot more crystallized now. And I know that this is really ultimately my my medicine to the world, is to bring forth something that, quite frankly, if this particular personality style, transparency is the last thing that's comfortable. And I've gotten a lot better about being authentic in a one-on-one environment or a small group of people where there's, shared trust and those types of things. But, this is a big step. So, bear with me here. But
Honoring you.
what I wanted,
I know. I'm like, this is huge.
Yeah.
And I just have to say, I'm in awe. I'm in awe of you. And I love the transparency. And I love that you lean into the uncomfortable, because that's also what we do here in Red Lotus Life. Like we actually run towards the uncomfortable. It's like whatever we feel is uncomfortable. Oh yeah, that's where we're going. We're going to go deep and we're going to get to the root.
Yeah.
Can I say something on what you just shared a little bit? So when you talked about being an expert, okay, that is something that I just have to share. I feel life experience makes you an expert in any field, whatever it is that is your life experience. Yes. I'm trying not to swear.
You won't bother me. I can promise you
stuff, because I get super passionate whenever we're talking about this kind of stuff. We're talking about purpose. We're talking about transparency, honesty. And it's like, no, fuck yeah, you are an expert. Like, you are an expert in your life experience. And thank you so much for being here to share that with us. So I want to just say that right now.
Well, I guess I think a natural place to start is just to talk about what life was like before, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago. I think I just celebrated my fiance and I just celebrated our 7th anniversary from our first date, and so I was thank you. I was already. I think by the time we went on our first date, I was already kind of on the fringes of the realizations of that there was something not right, and so I think that's probably the first place that I would need to talk about is I honestly had no idea that there was anything wrong. I felt like I was just a normal, healthy, functioning adult, and that the way I lived my life was probably better than most, and that the people that couldn't hack it, couldn't deal with life, were just weaker, and you had you were given this set of circumstances, whether they're the external or the internal, and your job was to just navigate through that and power through, and the strong make it and the weak don't. And I was completely blind and fooled by the illusion that my ego had put in place, and it's all of these behaviors, I believe, come out of some measure of trauma, and when I looked back at my life, I looked back and I thought, when I started to see that I was having, I started realizing there were some problems in the way that I thought and behaved and felt about things and my perspective on life, and that it wasn't exactly spot on. It wasn't always 100% right. And so there's like this peeling away that starts to happen. And so I look back and I thought, what in the world happened in my life that would justify me being, this way? I wasn't physically abused. I was never sexually abused. I didn't lose anybody that I was close to early on in life. It was just like, I really felt like, for the most part, especially in comparison to my brother, I felt like I'd had a pretty golden life. But the reality is we tend to kind of diminish the memories of things that were tough to deal with. And so, I don't really want to dig too deeply into it, but it's relationships, and it's things that happen in your upbringing. both of my parents, I love my parents dearly, and I have great relationships with them. But both of them come from a deep, deep cycle of abuse. Both of them had very abusive alcoholic fathers. And fortunately, both of them had strong, loving mothers that were able to, at a time when it was not acceptable, both of my grandmothers ran away with their kids to save their lives from that lifestyle. And they, they're cycle breakers. And my parents both did an amazing job of providing an upbringing for me that was completely different from theirs. But there were still fingerprints of that trauma on them, and I can't fault them. Matter of fact, I look at my dad and I see very similar things that I watched him from from a youthful perspective that couldn't really understand what was going on in his life. But when I look back now, I see the exact same things with him. But the unfortunate thing was he was living this through a time where it wasn't acceptable to talk to your guy friends about this kind of stuff. There was not the resources on the internet. There wasn't this movement to kind of break down these barriers, especially access to help for men, and men are also, generally some of the last people to try to ever seek out this, kind of help. And so, as a kid, for a certain number of years in your life, you are the center of your existence. And everything is really an extension of you. And when there are people in your life that are deeply, deeply unhappy, you internalize it. You assume that they're unhappy because of you. And then the way that the ego kind of builds that narrative is then when they are upset with you, it's just this confirmation. It's like, oh yeah, it really is me. So it's my job. If that person in my life doesn't seem like they're happy, or if they seem frustrated, it's my job then to kind of go fix that thing. Right. And when you can't, it just literally makes you sick. And so for a good portion of my childhood, I was a very tender-hearted kid, and got my feels a lot. And then I just remember kind of hardening. And, my brother, my older brother was 7 years older than me. And he had gone into basic training, and he came back, and all I wanted to do was show him how grown up I'd been, because, 7 years difference is a huge difference, especially between, brothers. And so when he came back, I wanted to show him that I was grown up. I was I'd kind of taken the mantle of being, the guy around and all that. And I remember him coming back, and we were sitting there, and he said, "Man, what happened to that tender-hearted kid I left?" And at that point I was like, because I'm growing up, man. I'm toughening up. This is me making this next step. And and I kind of took it as an insult at that moment. I was like, you still want me to be this baby that got his feelings hurt about things. And, all I wanted to do was be the guy that was cool enough to get to hang out with his brother and his friends. Right. And so, and so the general kind of idea is you can hang out with us, but you can't behave like this. Right. And that's just natural. That happens with any, friend group or sibling differences and all that. But it kind of set a stage for only this part of you is cool enough to be liked. So only bring that to the table. Right. And that wasn't his intent. My brother was an amazing person, had such a deep, deep heart. And he cared about people and would have done anything for anybody. And really it was his, he ended up with a prolonged battle of brain cancer, and he passed, it was 4 years ago in April.
I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, it was tough. But I will say this, that his death, was certainly a catalyst. It was the thing that tipped me far enough over that I realized that there was something I needed to get help with. And it started off with grief counseling, and I'm thankful that I went. But even at that point, I was already realizing there was some narcissistic behavior and patterns and tendencies in me, and so when I went to the therapist, I along with the grief stuff, I was talking to her about that, and she said, "Well, you don't have that." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She goes, "Just the fact that you're talking about it tells me that you don't have that." And I said, "Well, I've become aware about it, but this has definitely been the way that I've functioned in my life. Narcissism to me is a spectrum, and you have very overt outward narcissists that are easy to spot. I mean, they're all through Washington, D.C., Hollywood. You can throw a stick and hit one. And some are better at being polished than others, and some are just, it's just so easy. They're abrasive as well as narcissistic. But then there's folks that you kind of would never really see unless you were around them when the guard comes down, when the facade gets dropped. And so I decided I wasn't gonna pay a therapist to argue with them to get help in the area that I need help in. And so I decided I would try some different things, some different directions, and quite frankly, one of the main reasons that I'm on this recording today is because I think about how long I toiled searching for something that I could get traction with in order to make change in these areas of my life. And I think about the kind of the biblical story of all the years in the desert, when the Jewish people had escaped. And so I feel like I really toiled away in the desert, but it was, that was just the way I was wired at the time. I kind of have always gone about my own path to find solutions to things, and wasn't very good at asking for any sort of help or cultivating a group of people around to help, because vulnerability is in play there, and that was the last thing that I was searching for. But so I'm hoping that just some of the things that help me kind of get kick-started or get movement can maybe help somebody else. I just the biggest thing is I know what it felt like to live in that existence, and I think maybe that's the next thing to kind of talk about is what is it, what did it feel like, and what do I think are kind of the ear markers of these patterns in somebody's life.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. I love that you shared this part about your parents, because, and them being the cycle breakers, because, or your grandparents. It was your grandmothers, right?
Yes, it was my grandmothers, and then I guess in turn also my mom and my dad. I mean, they continued that breaking of the cycles.
Yeah, but I didn't know that about your, the ancestry part, because that's another thing that we do here in Red Lotus Life. We really look at the ancestry part. We look at the epigenetics of everything, and I just want to, like, your grandmothers are amazing, and so are your parents. So that's awesome. I want to give huge credit to that. To even break that cycle is huge. And then also, I'd love to just honor you and where you started to actually, on your journey, even start to notice these things. So that's actually what my question was. You had mentioned that you started to notice that you had some of these tendencies. How, and this was and I am sorry about your brother as well. So sorry to hear about that.
Oh, thank you.
Was it when his death was the catalyst for you to start to notice that and realize that? Or was it when you went to the grief counseling that you started to actually notice? Like, when did you start to notice, like, oh, wow, yeah, I might have some of this going on?
So I'm glad that you asked that question, because I think it's important. It's important to talk about that, because I think, one of the things that I've heard and discussed is that, narcissistic people are basically incapable of self-awareness. And that's why, like, a lot of health professionals don't necessarily hold out a lot of hope to make change in those areas. And quite honestly, so often people who are really, really good at being a narcissist can go to counseling for years, and the counselor will never know the difference. And but I will tell you what happened for me. My sister had been in a relationship with a guy that she ended up marrying, and now there was never any doubt. I knew for a fact I did not like him. There was never any secret about that. And it ended up being for good reason. But I watched, the way he behaved, and I was trying to figure out, why someone would behave that way. And he was definitely on the higher end of the spectrum as far as the outward narcissism and that sort of thing. And then a little later on, I was working I did some CrossFit competition stuff, and I was doing some coaching, and the lady that I was coaching was ending, she was in a relationship that was ending with this guy, and she'd been talking about kind of some of the things that were happening in that. And so I've always had a voracious curiosity about things in life. And I'm blessed to be able to kind of digest and retain information well. And it's not a skill I necessarily built. I just kind of have always been able to do it. And so I started reading and researching, and I figured out that, this behavior pattern was narcissistic. Right. And so I was like, okay. So I delved into reading about it. And then I started really watching the behaviors. And one thing that you can rest assured in, and this really kind of goes back to some of that mirror, the mirror talk therapy or mirror work that you're talking about. One clear indicator is nobody hates a narcissist more than another narcissist, because, and forgive me, you'll have to bleep this one, but the general rule is there's only room for one asshole in the room. And, there's some truth. Now you'll see narcissists marry, you'll see narcissists be in partnership together. You'll see narcissists engage in all kinds of relationships, but you can be certain that it's only because there's enough benefit for both of them in that relationship, at least perceived benefit, that they're willing to tolerate that other person. And so I started noticing that some of my thoughts, my thinking, and my behavior mirrored some of the things I was seeing in these other people that I was paying attention to. And initially, the thing that kind of was the catalyst to begin trying to figure out how to do something different was that was not the way I saw my behavior from inside looking out. And I found that behavior so detestable in other people that my vision of this perfection that I had set up, as far as, this facade I had created internally of who I am, it had to become better to not, that was really the kind of the first thing that happened. And that's not the healthiest way to approach it. All I wanted to do was, repaint the fence on this fake house, on the movie set, and just to make it right again, so I could then just move on with my life and not be looked at like that by other people. I never wanted to be looked at like I looked at them. And it was still in the same malignancy. It was the same pathology based around what happens with those tendencies, how they develop, and how it's what it's like to live inside that world. And so I think the natural segue, I guess, would be, what are the markers of narcissism, in my mind, at least. One is, it's kind of like the shift is almost like from the Copernican model. We initially felt like the Earth was the center of the whole universe, right? And everything rotated around it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this paradigm shift, and we figure out that the sun was the center of our particular solar system. And we rotate around that, and we don't really play nearly the central role in the universe that we once thought we did as a human race. So narcissism inherently, and we talked about a little bit about when you're a kid, everything is kind of about you. Well, all the, a lot of tenets, I think, of narcissism is that you revert back to that. If you ever made it out of it, you revert back to that. And most of the time it's because the wounds that happened that created that pathology happened in those ages. And so, if you think about it, maybe in an analogy, if you've ever played video games, you'll make it like all the way through this level, but you haven't made it to a checkpoint and you die and you have to start back, like at the last place, the save point or whatever. I think in some ways trauma is that way. It's like you get knocked back and you start from the last place you felt safe. And so a lot of times the part of you that you're dealing with that's really injured, you're trying to deal with it like a 48-year-old, but what you're really dealing with is, an 8-year-old. And your approach has to be a lot different. And I think we can talk a little bit about that later. And if I don't bring that up, please remind me, because it's a key piece of the work that I'm doing now.
I love that. I definitely want to come back to that. Definitely want to come back to that.
It's a key piece to the work that we do too. So yes, we will definitely go back.
Yeah. Okay. And so it's a me-centric viewpoint of the world, which is, that's a pretty easy one. I mean, I think anybody could kind of guess that to some extent. I think where it really becomes critical is if you, one big marker for me is if you don't have any relationships, any substantive relationships with anyone in which you don't carry the leverage in the relationship. And that could be emotional leverage. It could be financial leverage. It could be, having kids with someone and now you're kind of locked to them and that sort of thing. Another is, personalizing everything that's happening around you. It's being done to you, it's just not just happening. It's, you almost can prescribe intent to anybody else's behavior and just the universe's behavior in general, like the conditions that you live within. This idea that you're special, that you're kind of navigating the world as one of the few people that can see everything, and everybody else is just kind of blind and they don't get it, and they really can't operate at your level. There's this idea that the rules are really kind of made for everybody else. And you will strictly make everyone else follow the rules. But because I'm special, if I see something that needs to be different than that, then my justification is holy, and it can't be questioned. And I'm willing to cross those lines. And you shouldn't be bothered by that, even though you have to live by a different set of rules. It's this amplification of self and this looking down your nose kind of at the rest of the world. And it can be varied. And a lot of times what I can tell you is that is directly, it's almost like, the knob on a stereo. the less secure, the more like turmoil that's on inside, the more insecurity that's going on inside a narcissist, that volume knob just gets turned up. And it's like, and if you cross them, it can go, I mean, the knob doesn't stop at 10. It's like all the way to 15. And there's nothing off the table. And there's, if you want to read a little bit about it, anybody who's listening and wants to kind of delve into further look at the terms narcissistic fuel, narcissistic rage, and and I was the kind of person I've always been comfortable talking to people, and I've always been comfortable kind of talking in front of this. Those are never really have been things that have been problems for me, but every strength has the potential to be used in ways that you really regret later. And so being articulate and sharp-witted and quick of mind are all things that can be a benefit to you. But when those things turn against someone, those are things you can really, really deeply regret. When you just cut someone to the core out of that reflexive defensiveness, and it's not a premeditated conscious intention. It's just a reflexive reaction to someone poking a wound that, the hardest truth to hear is the one and you already don't like about yourself. And so I used to liken this to my philosophy was kind of like the Israeli response, where you have that Israeli-Palestinian conflict where the Palestinians, they throw a rock over the wall, and then what comes back over is a hand grenade. And if they throw a grenade over the wall, then there's rockets coming back. And my philosophy was, if you make the mistake of messing with me once, you won't make it a second time, because I'm going to make sure you know better. And those are hard things to even admit to myself today, because there was countless amounts of damage that I did to people both people I didn't really know very well and people that I care deeply about. And so, but I think, it's important for people to understand that when I was in the middle of that, I didn't know.
That's the question I
didn't know. Yeah. I didn't know how deeply unhealthy I was at that point. And so the pathology, at least in my mind, is, the ego is kind of like it's like the protective barrier that gets built, like almost like getting girded for battle. If you're playing a sport, if you're playing a sport that's high contact, high physicality, you want to put on as much protective gear as you want, just to so you can go out and play every day, right? And especially if you're injured. So if I've got a bum knee, I'm going to do everything I can to protect that knee in doing whatever I have to go do. And so it's a natural reflexive response to trauma, but that doesn't excuse it away. It's just the situations. Like, once you become aware of it, it's our responsibility. We're tasked with affecting change in that area. But until you're aware of it, it's hard to make any change. And matter of fact, there is a distinct pattern with narcissistic behavior in which and the tenets are leverage, projection, and gaslighting and manipulation. And here's the deal. You're like, how could this person, I've met a bunch of people who've been in deep relationships with as deep as you can with someone with narcissistic issues. But, you know, deep relationships and one of the common themes is like, how could I not see it? How could I not see it? How I feel like such a fool for falling for this. But have some compassion, because the person living in that body doesn't even know it. So how in the hell would you know? Right? I mean, it's like, and it's such a paradoxical arrangement living inside this condition, because you simultaneously see yourself. You've created this false image of yourself, and then the whole day, your whole existence is spent making sure that image is what you produce to the world and and in turn to yourself. And there's this assumption, because of that insecurity, your facade, this other image of yourself, is better than everybody else. But it's a vast overcompensation for really a deep self-hatred. And I think that's the piece that people don't really understand. I mean, I'm sure people have heard that, like, you know, they might have heard the concept at face value, but there's truth in that. There's a lot of depth in that truth. And it's something I still sometimes, and you know, I struggle to really process, because all the while I wanted everyone outside of me and really kind of my circle to see me as somebody who had it all together, you know, who's successful, who's smart, who's, you know, well off, or who, you know, and it's just like it's an exhausting process to try to maintain something that you aren't, you know, and it's just, you're so weary from this happening, but all the while it's happening at the subconscious level. And there may be people who go, there's no way in the world that someone who behaves this way isn't consciously strategizing how to think. I mean, they're just so good at it. There's no way they aren't practicing, but that is the power of what lies beneath the part of us that we kind of really get to experience every day, which is the conscious mind is just a small sliver of all the processing power that's happening up here. And so there's even been studies that have shown that decisions get made in your mind well before you make them. And so I can't remember the details on it specifically, but people were I think they were asked, they were mapping their brains, and they were like being able to pick up on sensory stuff, and they were figuring out where these decisions were what part of the brain they were getting made in. And so they would be reading the head, and these people were supposed to make a decision, like I think between left or right. And the crazy thing was the decision was made in that part of their brain about a second before they actually consciously made the decision to tap the button. So there's a lot more going on in what the hardware and the software that's running underneath the part that we really kind of see, which is really just maybe what's on the screen of the computer. But all of these moves are made in the background. And so, you know, how do you combat that? Like, how do you convince a computer that their software programming is wrong? You know, I mean, it's like, it's a difficult thing to understand. But what I would say, if there's, and this is, I've worked with some people, some friends who have either family members or somebody that has some of these tendencies, and they're like, how do I get through to them? How do I get through to them? And I said, I'm not an expert. I don't know how it's going to work for everybody else, but if you can help them see behaviors in other people And most of the time they'll bring it up to you. They're like, I can't stand that guy. He acts like this, or I can't stand that girl, or this person did this, and how ridiculous are they acting? And then you just agree with them. Yeah, that's rough. Like I don't agree with that either. And so you build, you build a camaraderie and understanding that, and then you start talking about, why do you think they act like that? And you start some conversations. And then the next time that person behaves in the exact same way, you can bring them back to that and go, this kind of reminds me of what that person was doing that day that you really didn't like. And I feel kind of the same way about the way that you're behaving, but it has to be, unfortunately, it really has to be with kid gloves. Like if you come at a narcissist, and you put them on their heels, you better have packed a lunch, because the amount of emotional energy that they're going to be willing to expend to maintain that facade is almost limitless. And so you got to be very careful with that. And if you get them on their heels defensively, the armor is up, and you've lost the chance to really have a real substantive conversation. But I didn't know. I was fully convinced that the problems that I had in relationships with other people were primarily in their court. And I didn't see how self-obsessed my thinking was. I didn't see how that all of the relationships in my life, all the people in my life, really at some level were just actors in a game, or in a play, or they were just chess pieces on a chessboard. And ultimately your whole existence is just maintaining that illusion. And so whatever anybody else has to do to facilitate that, that's their role in your life. And it's a shallow role. And I did, obviously I did love everybody, and all the important people in my life at the level that I was capable of loving them. But you truly can only love another person to the depth of the level that you can love yourself. And the real basis of narcissism is a deep, deep self-loathing, a self-hatred. And for me particularly, there's a component of guilt, shame, and punishment, right? And those are things that I'm still actively dealing with, healing from every day, especially this self-punishment. That came out in an embodiment session just a few days ago. It's just a recurring thing, and it's deeper than I thought it was. And so you're really not aware of the lie. You're not aware of the illusion. And everything you think and feel seems valid. Like it's 100% on target. You're right. You're right about what you think. Everybody else would have to be wrong. If they don't understand it, they just don't get it. Right. But all the while you're trying to maintain this image of perfection, and then ruthlessly treating yourself internally like, think about the worst coach, drill sergeant, abusive voice you could conjure in your mind. That's what the inner voice was like for me. There was never a kind word. There was never any understanding for why you couldn't pull off the 50 impossible things you had set up for yourself in order to validate your existence that day, or whatever it is. And so that's really the paradox. It's like, I'm better And I expect more. I expect myself to be able to live to this level of perfection. I don't expect that from anybody else, which is inherently this arrogant mindset, right? Like you're placing yourself in a higher regard, but when you don't hit it, it's just the perfect excuse to then just viciously tear yourself down, thinking that if I punish myself hard enough, then I'll learn my lesson and I'll get it done. I'll finally achieve my capacity. And so it's this belief that you have a capacity that's greater than anyone else's, at least for me. But I just haven't figured out the willpower and the discipline to get to it. But it was still, in my mind, still attainable, right? And so, so my inner voice was brutal, and because I was completely identified with it, it held more power in my life than anything else. It was, I believed that it was me and it was right, basically all of the time. And the first thing I would urge anyone who's dealing with any of the things that I'm talking about is the most impactful first step for me wasn't really realizing necessarily that I didn't like who I was, how I behaved, or that I noticed that the things that I thought and did were in alignment with people I didn't care for. There's a lot of feelings that come along with that, and we can touch on that in a little bit. But the most impactful thing for me was understanding that that inner voice is not me. It's the conditioned mind, the conditioned ego. It's all of the assembly of things that have kind of bolted on around, who I was created to be. And so when I began to stop identifying with that voice and I began to observe the observer, and shoot, I tried meditation, for probably a year, and it just made me more frustrated than anything because I had the wrong picture of what meditation is supposed to be. I thought it was, you just get to a blank mind and you just sit there in like this dead space for 15, 20 minutes. And so I would start meditating and be fine. And I would end meditating like almost in a rage. Like I would be throwing shit across the room because I'm like, I can't do this, and so then I, gradually realized that it's really not about that. It's just about, and this is kind of the analogy that ended up making sense for me is, the stream of thoughts it's really like, if you envision it like a stream or a small creek or river, the metaphor works out because you think about, there's some days that creek is running 2 inches deep, right? And then there's other days where it's 2 feet deep, and it's like it's bringing logs down with it because there's been rain upstream. And so that stream of thoughts is never going to turn off. There's always going to be something back there running. And so for me, I figured out the fighting chance for me was not to try to dam up the river, but just to climb out of it for a while at a time and sit on the bank. And at that point, if the water is choppy, it's choppy. I just notice that it's choppy and I don't get attached to it. And when you're not standing in the middle of the river, the water doesn't have the same effect on you. It's not trying to pull you downriver. It's not trying to shuffle you around. And so I ended up looking at meditation like just a simple break from trying to fight the current all the time. And so I started backing out of the river and just observing the flow and not getting attached to it, not getting, and that's when things kind of started to sink for me. But when I started observing the observer and I listened to that voice, I thought I would never work for this person. I would never play a sport for this person. I wouldn't be in the same room with this person. I think of all of the people that I didn't enjoy being around. And this inner voice was worse than any of them by multiple factors of, of 10 maybe. And it's painful. And I was using a journaling app called Lifecraft, and they would give these prompts sometimes. And this one prompt, and I committed myself to a week of doing the prompts, no matter what they were. And the second day of the prompt was, go have a conversation with yourself in the mirror, and like, I rolled my eyes. I'm like, oh God, come on. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, why? And so I was like, but that's one thing about me. If I like make a commitment to it, I will go do it. And so I went and did it. And I started off, I was just like, hey, we're kind of in a love-hate relationship right now. And but the longer I talked, the more it became a conversation. And what I ended up doing was apologizing to myself for how viciously I had treated myself all those years. And that ended up being a very impactful session for me that I didn't even want to go. I didn't even want to go into it in the first place, but it ended up being something that truly brought to mind just the depth of the ugliness in the way that I treated myself. And so I made a decision to start changing the tone, changing the way that I speak to myself. And that's still been a gradual evolution, something we touched on a little earlier about, trying to meet yourself where you were at when you built these defense mechanisms. And I had moved into a mode of talking to myself the way I would talk to someone that I cared about, but was probably, an adult. And so I kind of have a sarcastic, way, personality. That's the way I'm wired. And so, if somebody that I cared about, like maybe a guy that works in my organization, comes to me and says, hey, man, I made this mistake and I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to, and it's caused this problem. I'm like, hey, listen, the world's not going to end today, man. It's ultimately, if this is the biggest mistake we make, we're going to be okay. Just do this. And I'll generally joke around like, do it again, we'll have another conversation or something like that. They always know that. And so I had kind of shifted to talking to myself that way. And I felt like, well, that's the way I would take care of someone that I wanted to hold accountable, but with a certain amount of compassion and, keeping it lighthearted and not being so heavy. What I ended up realizing is that's not the way you talk to an 8-year-old that is deeply insecure about their relationship, the most important relationships in their lives. And when wounds happen like that, and so it's shifted now to where when I see things in myself that I feel like need to be addressed, I'm coming from like the loving papa, the dad who's talking to a hurt 8-year-old or a hurt 10-year-old or a hurt 12-year-old, because that's what it takes. You have to extend yourself the same compassion you would extend to somebody else, even though you sometimes don't feel like you deserve it. And it just takes doing it, even when you don't feel like doing it, even when you're angry with yourself, even when you're frustrated with yourself for falling into the same patterns or the same negative and ugly cycles, for having things come up that you think you had beat, have some goddamn compassion for yourself. And that holds true whether you deal with these things or you're just dealing with whatever it is that's going on in your life. It's amazing. I had a friend call me that had been working on their sobriety. They had some issues with alcohol, and this person called me and said, hey, I screwed up. I'm like, okay, what happened? It's like, I just feel like such a fool. I feel like such a fool. I've done so well. I've been sober for over a year, and some friends came over and I opened a bottle of wine and I drank the whole bottle of wine. And I was like, okay, did you fight anybody? I'm like, no. Did you embarrass yourself? No. Did you, did you, did you cheat on your spouse? No. Okay. So what happened? And I said, well, I promised myself I would never drink again, and I drank. I'm like, okay. So I said, I'm gonna not do the thing that I want to do, which is to say all the comforting things that I have queued up to say to you. What I want to do is I want us to play a game here where I'm the one calling you, telling you I screwed up and drank. And I want you to tell me what you would tell me in that situation. And this person said, well, I would say this and this and this and this. And I'm like, yeah, that's what you do when you care about somebody. Why can't you say those same things to yourself? And so life just gets so much better when you treat yourself with the same care and consideration you would treat someone else you love. And I think that's something that's key for anybody who's trying to make their way out of some of these destructive cycles, these spiraling thought cycles that happen. And it's like the longer that they're there, and you can look into, read The Body Keeps Score, read Clean Up Your Mental Mess, read which one of the Joe Dispenza books? It was Evolve Your Mind or something. But you look at what that does to you. The neural pathways get grooved in. You lock in behaviors. You send a chemical bath through your body that has real lasting ramifications. You talk about epigenetics, epigenetics and the fraying of gene telomeres and the reproduction of cells. That's how cancer starts. Genetic anomalies that just get reproduced. And we know more from science now than we've ever known about how deeply destructive these kinds of the anxiety and that brings adrenaline and cortisol and the fight or flight chemicals that come out in that response. Not only that, but just shame, regret, all of them have a physiological ramification as well as a psychological and spiritual one. And we literally get addicted to these chemicals. Just like you get addicted to sugar or cocaine or alcohol or anything like that. When your body has lived in a certain state for a period of time and you begin to change it, I've been so frustrated at times about how easy it is to fall back into old patterns. But our body is literally craving the chemicals that come from those patterns. And so again, have some damn self-compassion. It's not easy. It's not easy.
Yeah, that's one of the things that really allowed me to step, if you don't mind me interrupting, to step into just such unconditional, loving, and compassionate space is when I had done enough work where I was to the point where I could actually witness some people in my life who are living in sympathetic. They're living in that state. And yeah, it is addictive. And so I'm witnessing this, and then you can literally see them when they start to come down a little bit. They need to it's like another hit. It's like, okay, so there needs to be an argument, or we need to provoke a little bit, because it's so unsafe, so uncomfortable in that parasympathetic state. So it has been incredible to witness it, and it does allow me to have so much more compassion and love and understanding. So, and so much, oh my gosh, just incredible, the work that you have done. Mm-hmm.
And when you and I met, the conversation was we had someone in the room that was a licensed counselor, and and I think you specifically had asked, things about what are the what are the keys to self-awareness for someone who has narcissistic type tendencies? And the reflexive answer was that they're not capable of it. And,
Right.
and so I thought, well, that's not necessarily true. I mean, maybe at some level, maybe at, sociopathic narcissism, I'm sure it would take something massive to break someone out of that shell, probably something that's in direct proportion to the amount of trauma that created that malignancy. And that may not happen without something dramatic, either a dramatic life event or maybe the assistance of some of the medicines, like plant medicines, that can help soften the ego long enough for someone to be able to, maybe psilocybin assisted therapies, or I think there's still got to be somebody that's holding out hope to help affect change in those people's lives. But the general consensus that I've kind of gotten to is in the general counseling world is that narcissists are incapable of becoming self-aware, and I don't think that that's true. I don't think that that's the piece that's the barrier to entry to healing. It is, for me at least, my experience has been, it's the massive amount of shame and regret that comes with the self-awareness and the understanding of what you've been doing to people in your life for the better part of your life. And that is not a comfortable thing to face. And I think that is the piece. It's kind of like having a barrel of garbage in the middle of your living room, and it's on fire, and you need to move it out of the house or it's going to burn it down. But every time you go over to try to grab the edge of it to pull it out of the house, the pain is just so searingly intense that you can't even grasp onto it to get any movement. And that's one of the reasons I think, if someone's struggling in this area, get rid of the stigma around some of the ways that you can deal with that. And I think ketamine or psilocybin assisted therapies are going to be a huge gateway for people to be able to move forward. I know that my personal experience with psilocybin assisted therapy is that the barrel's still on fire, but it's like inserting your hand into a welding glove. You got just enough buffer to be able to grab that burning barrel and drag it, maybe 5 or 10 feet before the pain's too intense to continue to hold on to it. But it just gives you enough to let you manage it where it's not so painful that you have to immediately turn away from it. And because it's hard to relate to people, how almost impossible it is at times just to own that, to be able to see the truth and then own the truth and hold on to it. And I think the best way I can describe the way the ego works in these kinds of scenarios is that it's distorting, and it's intoxicating, but not in the way that people tend to have a positive picture of intoxication, right? It's not the fun, like I just got a buzz having a couple drinks after work kind of intoxication. It's just that it bends reality, and it makes it almost impossible to see the truth. And when I think about the ego, my relationship with it is changed. It's really, for me, it seems like it's kind of a lens. And if we lived inside a bubble, and the bubble was all solid except for one little lens, right? Like think about being in a submarine. Your whole your whole interaction with the outside world is through this little lens, and everything that goes out and everything that comes in has to pass through that lens. And so if that lens isn't kept clean and polished, then everything that goes in and out is distorted.
Mm-hmm.
And my lens was broken and chipped and damaged, and everything that went out and came back in was intensely changed, because that piece in the middle just wasn't where it needed to be. And so, inside we are in essence a spirit, an energy. And so, if I have something that I read every morning when I get up, and one of the first things is keep your lens clean. It's like, that's my reminder that that's going to affect every minute of my life for the rest of my life, is making sure that I don't let that stand in the way of what I need to be able to put out, the light that I need to put out into the world, and also the light that I need to receive from others. And so really the work is, and its base point is just trying to keep that lens where it allows truth in and out. And that's whether that truth is comfortable or deeply uncomfortable. And also not allowing yourself to fall into like a victim mindset. Because victimhood is a very potent actor in your life,
Mm-hmm.
because it personalizes everything. And it really alleviates you from the responsibility for your thoughts and actions. And it's a great way to excuse a lot of things. And narcissists will always see themselves as a victim in any situation. So if you consistently look at your life and see that it's being done to you, there's probably a shift that needs to happen. And it's amazing to me how much better life gets when you finally just own your shit. And it's certainly more difficult at times to own it, to not run away from the truth, not run away from the things that the light has been shown on, and that's the hard part. I mean, like once you know a truth, you can't unknow it. You can ignore it, you can convince yourself otherwise, but it's like, it's still there. And it reminds me of this poem my mom used to tell me when I was a kid, and I'll probably butcher it a little bit, but I think I'll get the bulk of it correctly. I think it says, "I walked a mile with laughter. It chittered all the way, but for all the things it had to say, I learned nothing that day. I walked a mile with sorrow, and nary a word was said. But oh, the things I learned today when sorrow," I can't remember the last part of it, but basically like when sorrow led or something like that. But what it talks about is, we really desire a level of comfort, and we're really, as society, we've become so discomfort averse. So the hard truth is, you're never going to grow if you're seeking comfort today. But the proposition for me became, am I willing to put myself into a position of intense discomfort today in exchange for a decreased amount of discomfort for the rest of my life. And that's really the value proposition that you have to take on, because getting deliverance in any of these areas isn't going to be easy, and it's not going to be comfortable. But damn it, you've got to care enough about yourself to want something better in the future to be able to sacrifice your comfort today. That's really what it comes down to. And as long as you're willing to get up every day and live in the uncomfortable and work and deal with those things, then you can end up being a real, genuine version of yourself that you can like. You don't have to make one up that's unattainable to meet. And I don't want people to take this as I want people to feel sorry for people who maybe have treated them badly in their lives. I'm not asking anybody to do anything other than just understand maybe a little bit more about what that person might be carrying and dealing with. And also to know that underneath there's another person just like you who just wants to be loved, who just wants to be taken care of, who just wants to feel secure in their life. And it's up to them. It's up to them to figure out how to get there. But maybe it doesn't feel so deeply personal when you're on the receiving end of something from someone, because I can tell you, no matter how bad they can make you feel, rest assured, you don't want to live a day in their life, because it is all day, every day, that they treat themselves the exact same way that they're treating you. And it's tragic. It's tragic and it's sad. But there is a way to move forward. And it's not quick, and there's no pill you can go have some doctor prescribe you that's going to make all this go this better. It's just making a decision you want something different, and then tirelessly seeking out how to do it. And hopefully there are resources and mechanisms out there that can help. That's really, in the end, what I want to do with my life ongoing, is to try to help people who are living this, have lived this, or are living this change, or, I hope to be able to just reach a hand out, and when they're ready for something different, be able to help them engage in it. But you're right. You can't want, and this is the frustrating term, I can't want it enough for anybody else.
Right.
And, all I can do is love them, and then, but also not engage in comforting a behavior that isn't serving them either. And so that's a tough part, because for me, and that's another aspect of this. When your first goal and only goal really in life is protecting that part of you don't want anybody to see or touch, right? Think about the rawest injury you've ever had. You got a burn on your arm, and it just kept getting hit and started getting infected. And it's almost like you can't even bear to think about touching it. That's what those wounds internally feel like. And so you just want to build a wall and keep people as far away as you can from those things. It's hard for me because I can feel that in other people now. Like I can just be around them, and it's so strong that it invokes the memories of those same feelings inside. Like I can legitimately, like, almost not breathe at times when I'm around somebody that is dealing with this stuff. And And that's one of the things that people don't understand. I really thought that my ability to read people was kind of a dirty thing, because I had only ever really used it to further my own self-interest or to protect myself. But every gifting has a way that can be used well, and there's the way that can be used nefariously. And what you'll end up finding is that people who have the ability, this need to protect themselves, you become an expert at reading the room and reading a situation and knowing where people are at. Because I mean, when you're in the unhealthy part of this, you walk in and you need to know immediately who's a threat, who can benefit me, and who can I disregard.
Mm-hmm.
And that's ugly. That's ugly things to have to say, but that's the truth. That's the truth. And there was a period of time, when if I were, after my marriage broke up, and before I met Rebecca, I was dating, and I could sit down at a date and I could know almost immediately what version of myself I needed to be if I wanted to go home with that woman that night. And so you end up you realize that, and you start to shut that part of yourself off, because it's not something you want to be, right? But what I've come to realize is that those same tools that I've used to defend myself and manipulate and get what I needed to keep this facade propped up, it really are the same tools of an empath. And that in the right position, in the right healthiness, if I'm able to operate from truth, from source, from letting the ego set to the side, then I'm at the point now where I'm having to really kind of create energetic boundaries so that I don't carry around this stuff after I talk to someone. And there's also this compulsion to immediately in that moment try to help them. And then but they're not ready to receive help. And then you end up creating distance. And so there's this whole other dynamic of learning how to wield your giftings appropriately, right? And because it can become very selfish. Like, it's very uncomfortable to me to sit and have a conversation with someone, see it all playing out, seeing exactly what's going on, knowing exactly what it would take for them to change, and then not trying to rescue them when they're not ready to receive anything yet. And so I have to be these days very judicious, and also have to be careful not to adopt the savior complex, because there's still an inherent need in me every day to kind of like justify my existence, and that's something that's one of those anchors, one of those foundational pieces I'm trying to let go of. But so for anybody out there that's dealing with this, there's something beautiful on the other side of it. It's not just getting to a place where you can stand yourself, and you can, possibly be authentic, and you don't have to conjure up a different version of yourself for every single person you interact with in a day. I cannot explain how fucking exhausting it is to have to be a different version of yourself for every single person in your life, and how freeing it is to just be okay if somebody doesn't like you. It's fine, and you don't have to vilify them. You don't have to make up some story in your mind, some narrative in your mind of why they're deficient for not liking you. There's just so much energy that gets freed up to do beautiful things in your life with, if you stop, beating yourself up and lying to yourself and leading this life of trying to be somebody who you're not. Just learn to love the part, the essence of who you are, and then get the rest of the shit out of the way and let that shine. That's the best thing I can say to anybody, as far as just just don't be afraid of how bad this is going to hurt and feel, because what's on the other side of it is so worth it. And I know I'm still not anywhere near where I'm going to end up being. But if anybody had told me, if anybody had told me 10 years ago that I could have just gotten to this part, I would have laughed at them. And so more than anything, I am just immensely thankful and grateful that I was in a position to be able to come to these realizations, and also having people in my life that loved me through it. My cousin, Adam Pratt, I couldn't do this without a nod to him. He was at the retreat, Sara Elizabeth met Adam, and but he's just been a constant anchor in my life, and a guy that, even though I tried to hide parts of me from, he knew all along, and he loved me anyway. And he saw through the facade, and he saw who I was at my core. And he was always the person that was there for me when I was struggling through the different phases of this. You know, this has been an 8 or 9 year journey, in truth. And I can confidently say that I wouldn't be sitting where I am today without that relationship in my life, and just internally grateful for him and everybody else. My mom, mom was just a huge part of my my makeup. You know, I'm really a very much a good slice of both of my parents, and I'm thankful for them both. But yeah, I think that's the stuff that I kind of wanted to share today. Now, I mean, if follow-up questions or any discussion stuff, I'm happy to. But I think that was what I came to say today.
I love it. And you know what? I'm really excited to be able to continue these conversations. It was a pleasure to be able to hold space for you to be able to share your story and your perspective. And I truly feel that the exact right people are going to receive all of this, and it's going to, in so many ways, in so many different sort of dynamics. Like, there were things already that I have picked up on that was a direct reflection for me. So many things are a direct reflection of me, but sort of in the opposite way that you intended it while you were sharing it. So I think I'm just really excited. I'm really excited to be able to share this and have this conversation. And I kind of want to go back and listen to it all again, and come back and ask questions and have a more interactive conversation, because I think it's gonna be really impactful.
Good. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say thank you. Thank you so much for sharing so transparently and so authentically. I am somebody that loves to hear people's stories. I can tell immediately, especially when there's resiliency, and I can tell when somebody has that. And I always just want, everyone has a story, and I just always want to hear exactly what that is. And you went so deeply with that today that I actually didn't want to interrupt. I just wanted to hear your story. So I was just listening this whole time. I was just listening, and I do have so many questions and everything, but honestly, I feel like this is an incredible this is an incredible story. I enjoyed hearing it this time. And next time, I know that we've talked about having other discussions and having you on again. And I'd just love to even go deeper into the different things, because you brought up so many you brought up a lot of my own experiences that not only I have done, like I have been the one doing these things, and so it has brought up the reflections for me and the awareness for me, but also the experiences that I've had in my relationships with those that have those tendencies. I was able to see a different side of that on many levels. I kind of don't really want to go into it yet, because you're right, Sara Elizabeth. It's like, I just want to process everything that I just heard, because I was able to hear it from a completely different perspective. And I enjoyed hearing it as well, and just hearing your process and your experience with all of this. And I just love your heart. I love your heart. I love your message. I love that this is something that you're deepening it even more in. I didn't realize that it had been such a long process for you. That was actually one question I was going to ask. But there's, there's just so much. There's so much here that is beautiful. And I hope, well, not hope, I know this is going to get to those who are seeking this knowledge, even those who are seeking to understand, but also those who are seeking to create changes within their lives. I just have huge gratitude for you. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So much gratitude.
Yeah. I would, I'm excited. I'm excited about the other conversations we'll have around this. And I'm on board for however many it needs to be. And I think we'll know, as we go through, but I definitely want to talk about I think tools for people who have people in their lives with these types of situations, and
For sure.
coming back and talking through maybe the things that, and I shared with you all before we started the recording. I against all of my compulsory inclinations, I didn't make an outline. I didn't think about a pattern or a flow of anything. I just wanted to show up open and let what come up. And so I know I probably danced around a whole lot of things, but so I would love to come back and just talk through maybe the pieces, the gaps in between, or questions that arose for you all that you didn't feel like were the timing wasn't right to ask them. So, if it's 2, 3 more, 4 more, whatever it is, I'm on board, and I'm just, I've toyed around with the idea of doing like Facebook Live videos, just talking through small snippets of things, but I've never really kind of been able to pull the trigger on it. And you all provided a platform for me to kind of take this first step of faith. And I'm also intensely grateful and honored that you saw fit to invite me on. And it's been like a lot of things in life. It wasn't easy, but I'm so happy that we were able to make this happen. And so just whenever the time comes, I'm ready.
Thank you for trusting us. I'm sorry. We all want to talk now. I was just going to say thank you for trusting us to provide the space to jump off the cliff. That's just so much gratitude.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. I think this is going to be a catalyst for you. I think this is going to be a gateway for you. I remember the first time that I shared my story in a public space like this, and it was that cliff. It was that cliff that I needed to jump off of to really step into my purpose and to really understand what I am here to do, and to understand even deeper my experiences. And I love this particular episode is going to be in a playlist that's for resources for people. And so as you were speaking, I mean, there's so many resources actually out there. There's so many resources that I'm excited to even have conversations with you around, that are even for those that don't necessarily want to work with substance-based or plant-based or anything like that, and they want to be completely holistic and really dive in. So there's just so much here. I can just see it all. So I just want to say thank you. Was there anything else that anyone else wanted to share before we kind of wrap up?
No, I feel really
I don't think
complete.
so.
Yeah. Enos, are you, is there a way that people can get in touch with you if they have questions, or would you like them to just comment on this, on the whatever platform that they're able to hear or see this on, or?
Yeah, I mean, that commenting on the platform is great, but you know, I don't really have I hope I guess at some point I probably need to kind of build a system for dealing with that kind of thing. But in the meantime, if somebody just wants to shoot me an email, it's enos.barger@gmail.com. So enos.barger@gmail. I will qualify that I do have a very full life, and it's at times it's hectic. I run a technology company, and I take care of a mom who's in stage 3 dementia, and have kids and a fiance, and there's lots going on. But it's important to me that if there's somebody out there that has questions or maybe some comment or something about what I talked about, and I will do my dead level best to try to get back with you and answer questions or anything like that. My ultimate goal is to serve people hurting people, and so I would be honored to get the opportunity to do that in even a different scenario than this, than on the video, but just maybe one-on-one type thing. So yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of people with a lot of questions. So I just want to say thank you again for even sharing that, yes, you're willing to talk to people and answer questions. To be honest with you, I even see maybe we do a live Q&A sometime. Like, I'll just plant the seed here, and maybe that's something that we could do. If this has been valuable to you as a listener, or you know someone that might gain some value from this, or I don't know, we just appreciate it if you like this, because if you like this, then we know this is something that you want to hear more of. We definitely would like you to share it, because that's the reason why we do these things, is to get the messages and the resources out to those who are seeking. And then if you are somebody that wants to hear more, especially on this particular conversation, then we invite you to subscribe, because then you will automatically get the notifications that there's something out there for you, a new episode for you. So just thank you all so much. I know that everybody, including listeners and those who are watching, your time and your energy are the most valuable pieces of you that you could share with us. So thank you so much. Enos, you're incredible. I just have to honor you, and it's just been incredible to witness you today. Thank you for sharing your heart with us.
Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you.
Okay. All
It's
right.
been my pleasure.
Until next time, we will see you then. Okay. Bye.
And live your life today.